Hey everyone, and welcome to Trampoline Insight. I'm Steven Gluckstein.
And I'm Nuno Marino.
Our main goal for this podcast is to share our insight on the sport of trampoline and all it entails.
On today's episode 2, we're going to discuss a hot topic, the postponement of the Olympic Games and World Games. Right, Steven?
Yes.
So what are your thoughts on the postponement of the Olympic Games?
Honestly, every day kind of changes my my opinion. At first, I was like, people were asking me early on, is it going to get postponed? Should it get postponed? And I said, there is nothing that will postpone the Olympic Games. The Olympic Games is the biggest thing. And I mean, obviously, I have a bias, but Olympic Games is the biggest thing in the world. So for it to get postponed is something huge. We've always had issues with the Olympic Games, whether it be the smog or terrorist threats on the Olympic Village or venues not being finished, and the games have always went on. So I thought there's no way. But then when quarantine started to happening and athletes were away from their gym and not able to train, then I started, changing my mind a little bit and thinking, okay, well, maybe it should get postponed. And with all the things that we've been going through for the past couple of weeks, I think it's a good thing. What are your thoughts? You think it's a good thing?
I agree with you completely. I think it was a great decision. I think they were a little bit pressured. I think the IOC probably wanted to stay a little bit longer and waiting to see where this pandemic was going to go and lead us to. But they were pressured to make the decision, I feel. But I feel the decision was correct. I think the postponement was the best decision, mainly because there's way too many people, way too many athletes right now that cannot leave their houses and cannot prepare themselves. Yes, we have a few that have the ability to still go to the gym and still do a couple of things. Some of them even have trampolines at home and do the workouts at home. But the majority of the athletes, they really can't. So I really think the postponement was the best decision that they could have done. To be honest, I'm happy with it. And I know that everyone will be able to prepare themselves for next year. I think it's going to be much better.
So what about the dates that were chosen? What's your opinion on that? You think it's a good date, or you think they should have been a little bit earlier?
I think it's good. I think it was spot on. They basically put it a year from now or a year from what it was supposed to be. And I think it was good. That allows everyone to maintain the same planning for the next year and allows them to maintain the same calendar for the games, which it hasn't been out yet, but I believe that's what they're going to do.
So my philosophy is I think they need to keep as much of the Olympic Games as exactly the same. So when they were talking about putting in December or putting in the first quarter of 2021, I wasn't really too thrilled about it. I think once they announced that it's going to be almost to the day, 365 days later, I was very happy because
yeah, me too.
Whether it's the climate or what's going on in the city, everything needs to be as the same as possible.
So with you thinking that way, I have a question for you. So I've seen a big discussion more on the gymnastics side, on the artistic side, that they believe, or some people believe, that on these Olympic Games next year, only people that were eligible to compete this year with the ages for this year should be allowed to compete next year. What's your take on that?
I agree with it. I think that everything should be as identical as possible. I think to change the rules mid-cycle or would be like playing a game of soccer and the ball goes out of bounds and he's like, oh wait, no, he kicked with his left foot, so it's okay now. You can't change the rules, mid process. We have set rules, and obviously things are going to get changed, but if we can stick as close to them as possible, I feel like that's the fairest for all people, whether it be coaches or gymnasts or athletes. What do you
So,
think?
so for me, I don't know. I can see arguments on both sides of this one. Okay, and I would be, as an athlete, I would be okay with both the situations, especially because there have been other situations in the past where, for example, we could not go to European championships and all the other countries go, right? We were at disadvantage, we could not go, and we just live with the situation, and that makes us better athletes. I, I feel like this is a major problem for everyone. So every country is going to deal with the same problem. I don't see the ages being a big deal, in my opinion. I don't. The question here is, how easy is it to maintain these ages for selection procedures for the offices to make sure that they don't make mistakes on who's eligible and who's not eligible? But how easy is it to do it compared to the outcome that it gives us? So I really don't know if like I said, I'm not very picky on this one. I really am not. I could easily see pros and cons on both ones, and I would accept any of the decisions.
So let me ask you another question. As an athlete, was it more difficult to qualify into the Olympic Games or qualify Nuno Marino for the Olympic Games? Was it more difficult for Portugal to qualify or for you to qualify?
Honestly, that situation was probably the same, but maybe to qualify, Portugal was a little bit harder, I would say.
Yeah.
But,
So I
but
agree with that. So imagine if these people that worked so hard to qualify their country in, and now all of a sudden the next year, someone who wasn't age eligible, and we don't know if they're better or not, but didn't have to go through that difficult process, that stressful process of all these World Cups and World Championships, and now they just get to go, poop, hey, I'm here. I'm going to compete and take your spot for Olympic Games.
but the question is, okay, so but those people that went through the process, they also gain more experience in the process, right? So they're also better athletes for it. So theoretically theoretically they should be better athletes than the one coming right now. And I'm not saying that what you described cannot happen. Of course it can happen. Okay, and you probably saw it happening when Vlad showed up to the top leagues, or even, well, Dylan did not really have any. Dylan from New Zealand did not really have anyone above him at the top. I not that I recall, but Vlad had. Vlad had plenty of other athletes that were better than him, and he showed up and he started beating them right away, right? The moment he made World Championships team and all that. But that's 1 in 1,000, I think. So
Right.
how many of those are actually going to show up? How many athletes that were not age eligible the previous year that are going to be next year are actually going to beat the ones that qualify the spot? That's a big question. I really don't know if that's worth all the drama of that. But again, this is good. It's good that we don't even have the same arguments, or not to say the same
Opinions. Yeah.
opinion on this, because that's exactly what this is for. This is a good brainstorming. And feel free to drop a comment below and let us know what you think about this subject, because this is important and we want to hear everyone's opinion on it. Yeah.
And I think it's also important. I mean, especially in trampoline, but I guess if there's people listening from artistic or other sports, to reach out, if you're an athlete, to your athlete representative, or to reach out to those that are on
Absolutely.
the committees making these procedures, because you coaches and officials and athletes have a say in it. It might be difficult to go all the way up to the FIG or the IOC, but especially at a domestic level, it's very important to put in your input, because and you know as well as I know that being on these committees, we hear those voices, we read those emails and those letters, and we take it into consideration. And I think it's important for them to do that. So just a little
Absolutely.
side note.
No, and good side note, in case you don't want to put on the comments, you don't want it to be visible for everyone, that's totally fine. Just drop us an email, trampolineinsight@gmail.com, and let us know your thoughts. Because like Steven says, we get all those informations and we bring it to the committees, and we take your opinion into account all the time.
All right, so let's get back to this Olympic postponement. Here's my next question for you, which is, a big can of worms, a big messy question.
I love messy questions.
How should the Olympic qualification go? Because right now, a little less or about 50% or a little less than 50% of trampolinists are qualified for the Olympic
Now
Games.
a little more,
Than
a little more.
50%?
Well,
No, I think it's like
th-
six from the final of World Championships, right?
correct.
So there's
But
still
from the
about
World
10.
Cups, okay, but from the World Cups, if you wanted, the rules state that if you don't, if we cannot have any more World Cups, you would still count the best four, and we have four. So let's say by any chance we could not have any more World Cups done that count for Olympic qualification, we could still take four, and that would be the rest. Now, what we do not have is continental championships that for some continents are important for the qualification of their continent. So that, in my opinion, so if I would have to say now, I would say that 85% is already done if needed be. Now, obviously, we're missing a World Cup, right? And many athletes were counting on that World Cup to get the last point they wanted. And I think this postponement allowed us to still do those World Cups at the end of this year, and if FIG wanted, allow it to count for the Olympic qualification, and also if
So
the IOC allows it.
so really quick, can you go over the criterias for those listeners that maybe haven't kept up with the qualification process? So how is it before all this craziness? How is this supposed to be laid out?
So before all this craziness, you would get up to 8 athletes from the finals of World Championships, one per country. So if I remember correctly, and we can probably search that, I think we have 6 men and five women. So that would be 6 countries for the men and 5 women for the 5 countries for the women. And we have to verify that. I really do not remember those numbers. Okay, and then after that, you have the World Cups, which you have 6 World Cups and your top four count. So you add all those points of the World Cups and you have those points. Now, when you get to the World Cups, those that will qualify their country at World Championships are removed from that World Cup list, and the new Olympic qualification list is created. The points are replaced because when they get out, they get the people that were at the below them go up a spot, right? So they get new points. The
So
points are recalculated again for the new Olympic qualification list, and from there you get. It really depends how many spots you have, because then you have continental championships that if your continent is not yet qualified through the World Cups or two World Championships, it goes in whoever wins the continental championships, right? And then we also have the host country spot 15, and the tripartite commission spot 16. Okay, so those are out, that will be decided later, and those spots, when they are decided later, they actually will go back to World Championships 2019. Okay, so the World Cups is hard to know how many spots we have because it depends on the continents that are represented already, and depends on the continental championships that we don't have yet. So that's the biggest problem here. So it's really hard to know how many spots we have for the World Cups. It's up to spot 14, but it depends on that continental championship. So let's say that FIG decides to do the last World Cup at the end of this year, right? So Italy was the World Cup we had scheduled for April, then scheduled for June. Right now, scheduling in June, but the FIG already sent that letter yesterday, I think, or a couple of days ago, saying that they will be looking at rescheduling the other competitions. So let's say they reschedule, or that them and local organizing committee from Italy decides, okay, let's do it in October, for example, just an example. So if that World Cup can be used, then that will be the last World Cup of the Olympic qualification. That will be the 6th, and then top 4 will count. So I believe that's where many athletes are still playing their game and taking into account that World Cup. And my hope, this is just my hope, and again, this is just my personal opinion, my hope is that we can also do some continental championships at that point in time, because Pan Am champs can still give a spot for the men, because we have no men from Americas represented yet or qualified yet. So Pan Am champs for the men is important. And we have other continental championships that we could probably really use that, or make sure that they happen at that point in time. That would be great.
so theoretically, we could secure a continental spot, or any continent could secure a continental spot before they know, even if that continental spot will be used, should the World Cup happen afterwards. So if the continental spot happens in August, and let's just use North America as an
Yes,
example,
as an example. Yep.
and someone wins the continental spot, right? Let's say from Mexico, okay? But then an American at the last World Cup wins the World Cup and then gets qualified through the ranking list. Then that Mexican who just won the continental spot and believes that they qualified for the Olympics and partially did, then gets revoked, and then the new spot goes
Correct.
to the World Cup ranking.
That is correct.
That's a little messy.
Well, but I think the World Cups will probably happen before the Continental Championship. I think we shall see. I don't know, but I hope they will. I hope they think about that.
So do you think there should be any amendments in the qualification process?
So I can tell you that we've been having some calls with the ILC athletes representative, and the president, Mr. Bach, has been on those calls, and the ILC seems very open to do any amendments necessary for the selection procedures. Now it will depend on the FIG, the technical committees, the executive committee, what they want to do changes or not on that. I really think that this postponement of the Olympic Games can give a breath of fresh air, so people were not pressured about the qualification. And I really think we don't need to do that many changes to our qualification. If we can just realize, or you can just do the missing competitions later in the year, then we can use the same qualification. But again, it will depend on what FIG has in their mind and how they wish to do that qualification. So maybe.
So theoretically, if the selection procedures stay the same, then those that qualified at the World Championships are qualified out almost 2 years prior.
That
right?
is correct. That is correct. And one thing that the IOC said on the last call we had is whoever is qualified already to the games will remain qualified to the games. So yes, I believe those will stay qualified almost 2 years before the Olympic Games. It's unprecedented, but it will be like that. But and on that topic, we can go a little bit to the World Games, because the World Games were also postponed a year, which was something that I was worried about because they coincide partially in dates with the new dates of the Olympic Games, and I was a little bit worried how they were going to do that. But so they decided to postpone for a year, which I think it's great. But now those athletes, how long before the World Games are they qualified? Because they qualified their spot.
That was
in
at the 2019, right?
Correct. So
3
2020,
years.
2021, 2022. That's 3 years. So it's a good question. Should FIG start a new qualification at Worlds next year? It's a good question
That's an
for our
even
listeners.
tougher question.
I know it's an even
That's a
tougher
tough
question.
one. I think for
So
those that qualified are going to
I
riot,
know, right?
and I think the audience and the spectators and the upper management of FIG want to see who's the best now,
Who's the
right?
best? Exactly, right? Because 3 years
So
ago,
people can be
although
retired,
although you do qualify your country, okay?
right?
So inside the country, they can still choose the best one. But still, it was a country that was qualified 3 years before the competition. That's a long time ago, right? So why don't you guys drop us a comment below and tell us what you think about this? And don't forget to subscribe and click the bell icon.
Like, I think there's a lot of countries, especially when we're talking about double mini and tumbling, that don't have full teams, and that these people that qualified were outliers or superstars, right? And so it's very easy that within those 3 years that athlete could retire or be injured.
Correct.
And so then we could see a severe drop in execution at these World Games, because there could be subpar athletes, that maybe they're first year seniors, or these countries are literally inviting just anyone to fill that spot.
Correct. And it has happened in the past that several countries refused to go to the World Games, and other people had to be invited after that, and it might happen here again. You know, it might happen if there is no new qualification. It might be something that might happen. That country might not have any more athletes to go, and someone else on the list will end up being invited. But it's curious. It's interesting because for those that already qualified and maintain shape, I bet they do not want another qualification. Why would you, right? They already got that spot. Some countries are like the best ones that got the short spots. Why would we need another qualification?
Yep.
Right. But at the same time, 3 years, it's a long time. And
So
if
I
they're the
think
best, they should be able to qualify again.
here they have to go, the FIG that is has to fall back on their values. And I'm not, to be honest, I'm not certain of their values. Are their values to create the highest level of competition possible, or are their values to be what is fairest, and especially fairest to the athletes, right? So those are two completely separate things. And I'm not certain what their philosophy or their values are.
Well, I think FIG tries to be the fairest for everyone. I really, from what I learned being on the technical committee representing the athletes, I think we try to do always what the fairest for the athletes. But this decision, it's a tough decision, huh? It's a tough decision. I don't know what will be decided, or if it's even going to be discussed. They might have other subjects that are way more important than this. Something that they will just let go as it is and not touch.
So
We shall
here's
see.
another exciting thing for our listeners. I mean, some are very, I think, incorporated with the sport, but some are out of the sport. So where are the World Games going to be held? The next World Games?
The next World Games are in Birmingham, Alabama.
Yes. Who else lives in Alabama?
I live in Alabama. An
So
hour
right
and a
in your
half from
backyard.
Birmingham. Right in my backyard, yeah. I was kind of excited to go watch double mini and tumbling since we don't have synchro anymore at the World Games, and it's been such a big disappointment. And, that's a good question. Maybe with them being postponed, maybe they want to insert synchro back on. Why
That's a
not?
maybe, but I mean, but what was the I don't think the reasoning for them taking out synchro was timing. Well, if
It
it's
was
in
not.
2021, but if it's 2022, maybe we'll put it in. Yeah. So I
It
don't
was not
think
timing.
the variable of time is necessarily the factor why synchro was removed, but it's supposed to be put back in, right? Is what I
Uh,
heard.
well, I don't know.
It
To
could
be
be a
honest,
rumor.
I don't have an answer for that question. I really don't. But if you heard that rumor, all I can say is I hope that rumor is right, because for me it was a big disappointment for synchro to leave the World Games. As an athlete, I always saw it. Olympic Games for individual, synchronized World Games, right? It's like the Olympic Games for the non-Olympic disciplines.
Right.
So it's the top competition for non-Olympic disciplines. It's a phenomenal competition. So I always love to go to World Games. My first World Games in 2001, Akita, Japan. I was so amazed that competition probably locked me into this sport for the rest of my life. I'll never forget it.
We were together in the 2009 World Games in Kaohsiung, Taiwan. That was a
Yep.
fun one. That was very
Yeah.
fun.
What place did you
The
guys end up in?
We didn't do so well in finals. I think we were like fifth or sixth.
We were
So
fourth place.
which
We
was
were
a
this
really
close for a medal. This
we
close.
were really bummed because in 2009 that was when we were winning all of our World Cups, and that was when we were, you know, in our peak, if you will. We were,
Mm-hmm.
doing awesome. So,
You
but
guys were
I mean, it
doing
was a
awesome
great
at that time.
it was we being Logan Dooley and myself representing USA, and at the time you were jumping with Ganchino representing
Yep.
Portugal, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So I remember that was a good time, especially trampoline is such a tight knit community, hanging out afterwards. And I remember going on excursions with the Australians to the beach, and not to get too sidetracked, but I mean the whole organization was outstanding. They had the cards to let you on any form of transportation, the bus, the train, you could go anywhere. The signs were all in English. So the World Games is something so special. you know, and I hope that this postponement doesn't get to take that away from some athletes that were supposed to be there.
I agree. So going back into our topic, what do you feel about these athletes that were planning on retire right after the Olympic Games, which it's the highest competition you can have, right, for everyone, and now they have to stay one more year if they want to go to the Olympic Games. And I read somewhere that Simone Biles already said that she's training and she will stay one more year. But what about our trampoline athletes? What do you think? Who do you have in mind that think that they might stop after Tokyo? Because it's hard to predict. We don't really ask these questions to anyone. When are you planning on retire, or when are you planning,
Right.
right? But there are a few athletes that probably will think about retiring after Tokyo, right? So, and one that comes to mind, and maybe I'm wrong, but it would be Kat Driscoll. But I don't know. But
I think, didn't she already announce on Facebook? I could be wrong, but I thought she had announced that that was her last World Championships.
well, she might be wrong now. Or maybe she's still correct, because if the Olympic Games are before World Championships, she won't do the next one, or she will.
So let's ask another question it's in regard. So I'll answer this question. So as far as retirement, I mean, in the USA, our veteran athletes, right? We have Jeffrey Gluckstein, my brother. We have Alexi Shostak from TNT Express in Louisiana. I'm not sure where to throw Nicole Ossinger on there. I mean, she is a veteran, but she's still young.
She's still pretty young. I think Nicole could do one more cycle easily.
Yeah, and Charlotte Drury, who just had a recent comeback. So, you know, she's a hard one to tell, because she had just come back for a year and a half, right? So to come back, which also could be tough if you're someone like that. And I remember Erin Blanchard did the same thing in 2008, where she had retired and then came back for the Olympic trials. Not saying that Charlotte had done the same thing, but had come back the year of the Olympic trials, and she ended up qualifying the USA because Elena Hebert had bent her knees on the last skill, and instead of being a double A, was called a double tuck, and then she ended up getting second place. And
why does the USA always have this drama for Olympic qualification? It's something.
It's tough. So
okay, but finish your question, otherwise you'll forget about it.
No, so for those people that are planning to do that, maybe they haven't even come back yet. Maybe they were planning to come back now in February, March to qualify for USA for Olympic Games. Now have to end up training for what they thought was going to be 6 months is going to be a year in 6 months, right? So, but I'm not certain. I don't think this is something that people talk about really. As common as maybe what I thought they used to, and maybe I have a bias in my head. But I know at least my brother's up in the air. He says it really depends on a lot of different variables. It depends on how this cycle goes. It depends on how school goes, how work goes. You know, there's so many different variables in these athletes' lives.
And I bet that's like that with everyone. It's not just him.
Right.
I remember when I thought about retiring, that was the same thing with me. Okay, am I ready to go from this athlete life to the workforce, and what am I going to do? Right. So it really depends on their lives and what they're ready for. I believe that's like that for a lot of people.
Right. You know, thinking about retirement, those old international superstars like Dong Dong's not that young either, you know, and he might have some back problems. And I think this postponement is probably the worst case scenario for him, for poor Dong Dong, because they have 10 billion younger athletes coming up in the ranks that are just, you know, gnawing at his heels, trying to beat, you know, Dong Dong and Gao Lei and Tu Xiao. And
that is true, but I don't feel like these athletes coming up in China are as good as they were with that age. Let me say it differently. When Dong Dong and Tu Xiao showed up, right, they were significantly better than the previous ones, right? The new ones coming up, and Gao Lei, He's pretty good, jumps pretty high, but technically, I don't think he's as good as Dong Dong and Tu Chao. But and the new ones coming up, they're not as good yet to just easily take Dong Dong and Tu Chao out. I don't feel that they are. They're good. They're good compared with the rest of the
Well,
world, but not as good as it was when Dong Dong and Tu Chao. That was like a surprise, and they were like, wow, right? These kids are not wow anymore. They're just Chinese.
right. They were well, Dong Dong and Tusha were pioneers. You know,
Correct.
they pushed the envelope. They changed the whole
They
competition,
did.
pushing the
They
difficulty in the
sure
time of
did.
flight, you know. So it's I don't know how to possibly push the envelope even more to set new boundaries, you know. It's wild. But you know, it will come, you know, it will come. But so anyway, let's go back to the Olympic postponement. Now, a lot of countries probably have already some domestic process of
Correct. Qualification. Yep.
Olympic qualification domestically, right? So who will represent their country at the Olympic Games? Now, do you think that should be start from zero and start when? Or do you think if they have that process started, it should just be continued and stretched out between now and towards the Olympic Games?
And you're talking about domestically, right?
Yeah,
Because that could also be a question if FIG should start from zero or not, which I don't think they should start from zero. But let's say domestically now, I think domestically they probably should start from zero. Let's say I don't know other countries, but in the US we had 1 out of 3 competitions done, right? So, but like we just said for the World Games, how can you count a competition that was more than 12 months ago, right? And when you have the time now to do 3 other competitions to count the best two, like we do, uh, from the beginning. Yeah, I think that makes a lot more sense. And again, this is all unofficial. Nothing has been discussed yet, but about this, we're waiting on to see what the FIG is doing with their qualification. So the committees are inside USA can talk about. There is nothing official, but this is purely my opinion. I think it should probably start from the beginning. It makes a lot more sense.
so like let's say some countries, I'm not certain which countries do this, but let's say someone finaled at the World Championships and they earned some points towards their qualification, that should get wiped out, and that World
No, no,
Championships
no,
is
no, no,
even
no,
a
no.
long time ago. If that's a part of their
Yeah,
selection procedures, then do they need to start over as they get closer? That's what sounds like what you're saying.
no, 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 no. Well, in our case, we don't do that, right? So our case starts from zero. Everyone starts from the same place in the beginning of the year when we start those competitions. I think in that instance we can start from zero again. If other countries, and they do, they use the result from World Championships, and if you qualified your countries for the spot, you get more points already ahead of the pack and everyone. That's a great question. I probably would still give those points ahead of the pack for those. But you're right, that was already 2 years ago. That can have a really big decrease in performance, right? We don't know, but these are unprecedented circumstances, so we really don't know what's going to happen. But again, if my personal opinion, I would probably keep those points from the World Championship still, and I would start the domestic qualification or qualification procedures from the beginning. That's what I
So
would do.
then, so then again, what would you say similar to those of the World Games that trained and stressed and went into that the qualification process, whether it's 1, 2, 3, whatever how many process they have, and they started that process and earned their spot. Is that fair to then now take that away from them?
That's a good question, but I would say the World Games are probably on the same spot as the Olympic Games. If they were so close, they were so close. Well, the World Games was a year after, so they probably didn't even start that process. I don't know. It's hard. It's hard to know what other countries are doing. Just let us know in the comments what your countries are doing. But again, World Games. I think there was time for World Games, and personal opinion only, they could easily redo the qualification again or next World for World Games if they wanted. I think.
I wonder if they could find a new procedure somehow to wait the last worlds, and then they have an option of somehow, if they don't have someone competing in the next world championships, or if that level has dropped significantly, that they can somehow be replaced. This might
That's
be
a good
something to
point.
look into.
Correct, correct. Again, that will depend how much time FIG wants to give to the World Games, since they have the Olympic Games to worry about. So that really depends how much time they want to allocate to that problem and how they want to fix it. To be fair, that would probably be the most fair situation. Give a percentage to the ones that are already qualified and find a way with the new worlds how to get to a new procedure. And even now, they could even use the World Cups if they wanted, because now Double Mini has World Cups. So let's say we do some World
Right.
Cups this year, right? And World Cups next year, we could use those to qualify for the World Games if they want. Again, it's all dependent on how much time they want to allocate with the World Games. But yeah, all those are great solutions in my opinion.
So there's a two-part question coming up for you. So yeah, so you have to think twice. Twice is hard. Number one, do you think that the level of if this quarantine will hurt the level of competition coming up in this year, or even trickle over into next year? And part two, is there anything that these athletes can do at home if they don't have the equipment, if they don't have a rod floor or a double mini or a trampoline? What can they possibly do at home to ensure that their level of competition won't be hurt?
So I think that the first part I'll answer. The second part you answer, because you definitely have the best answer for the second part. So I'll answer the
But I want
first
your
part.
opinion.
I'll give my opinion too.
Yeah.
The first part, I think for sure it will hurt the level of the sport. I really think so. Being at home for 8 weeks, it's not good for anyone. It's simple as that, right? Whenever they start jumping, everyone knows they're going to have back pain on the first week and all those things. That's pure regular process whenever you go back from vacations and jump on a trampoline, right? Now, how long will it take for them to readjust? It's hard to know, because it really depends on the person. I can tell you this: I never really did much vacations in my life. I really didn't. All that I stopped was 1-2 weeks at the most. Okay, never stopped more than that. After the Olympic Games in 2004, I stopped for 2 months, 8 weeks. Okay, 8 weeks. When I came back, was probably the hardest comeback that I ever had. Obviously, right? 8 weeks was obviously the hardest comeback I ever had, and it was pretty hard for my body to readapt to all that impact that a trampoline is. It's pretty hard. So I think, and let's talk in our situation that we have, right? We have right now an announcement that our national championships will be postponed, or are being postponed, and they're trying to find us a place for it to be, and we don't know dates, right? Let's say that we get in the gym and we have national championships 2 months later. Okay, because it's possible, or even 1 month later is possible, but I really hope it's not. Okay, but let's say 2 months later. 2 months, I don't think 2 months after a 8-week period is enough to have these athletes do at the same level that they were before. And that's probably around the same time that we'll probably have a World Cup. So for sure, we'll see an impact. We'll see a big impact. Maybe we'll have 3 months for the World Cup, I hope, right? Because really no one knows when the end is.
Right.
No one knows when we can come back to, we can go back to the gyms and train. So I hope that we can have 3 or more for the World Cup. But even then, even 3 months, there's a lot of people, and when we have talked with our athletes, and there's a lot of people that are worried, okay, how are my skills going to be whenever I go on the tramp? Okay, I already had problems with some skills, because I think that 90% of the world has problems with skills. I had, you had. There's always a moment in time that we have problems with skills. So how is my body going to react to 8 weeks, 9 weeks without touching any equipment? Because yes, they can still do conditioning, and that's the second part of the question. They can still prepare themselves and stay motivated and communicate with other athletes and do what probably everyone is doing right now, which is virtual training. They get on Zoom or any other app, FaceTime, group FaceTime, and they do workouts and they work on their cardio, on their strength. But in the end, it's really not the same thing as jumping on the trampoline. I'm sorry. It's really not, because when you jump, you get loads that you cannot get by being on the ground. It's simple as that. Your body may be fit, but it doesn't mean that it's fit to receive those loads that a trampoline gives to you, right? So
Well,
I think the impact is going to be big. I think the impact's going to be big. I think
Well,
everyone is going to feel less ready. Yeah, sorry.
I think also that our sport is so technical. You could be the
Correct.
most fit, but without the equipment to get that finesse, that exact angle and exact timing, which is all that we're doing when we're training, is trying to find
The
that perfect timing and then
and perfect
memorize it
angle.
and
Yep.
and that's it, you know? And so I think it's going to be pretty tough. How long do you anticipate? Let's say it's in 8 weeks out of the gym. How long do you anticipate the competition being hurt for before we see the level of time of flight and difficulty and consistency where it was before the quarantine?
So let's say they stop for 8 weeks, right? I think we will not have these athletes do the same level as they were before at least 7 or 8 months.
Wow.
The best ones, maybe 6 months. The best ones. I think the highest level,
Yeah.
maybe 6 months. But it because and it really depends how they are managed in the beginning, in my opinion. If they're pushed too hard and they get injuries, then to recover from those injuries, then it will going to take longer than actually going slower in the beginning. But
Right.
again, that's just my personal opinion. Other people might disagree. I from what I've seen, and the same thing with skills. If you don't take your time to go back to the drills and redo the skills, and if you get scared on one skill, then it goes like a virus to all the other skills, and then it's a worse position than you were before. So
Hmm.
start slowly, in my opinion. Start slowly, physically and technically, and I think if you start slowly, maybe 6 7 months, you can probably be doing the same things you were doing, not the same way you were doing, until you get the same way and the same level of confidence and the same lines and the same suppress and everything. Until you get that, I really think you won't see that for 7 or 8 months. So
In my head, my timeline was about 6 months, so I don't think we're too far off.
no, it really depends on the person. And again, we're going to base these things on our personal experience. That's normal, right?
Hmm.
We're going to base these things on what we've seen and what we know as coaches. And I really don't, can it be expedited? It might be expedited. It really depends on the person that you have in front of you. It really does. There are some people that probably still have a trampoline at home, a backyard trampoline, even if they can't do many skills, but they can still do the flips and everything. It's going to be much easier transition because they can still jump, and the body still receive a little bit of load, not as much as before, but some loads, right? And you can still maintain your aerial awareness in some basic skills, right? It's going to be much easier. That transition is going to be exponentially faster than anyone else. Now, if you are purely at home, like we have, I don't know, I think 70% of our worldwide athletes are right now at home without jumping on trampoline, right? I think that's going to be the hardest part. No doubt. That's going to be the toughest route to go. Simple as that.
Hmm.
So now
Yeah.
you tell us about what you think that they can do at home to prepare themselves. I already gave you my opinion.
Yeah, so I think there's a few things that we can focus on here. Um, being mid-season is not necessarily, and my answer also is depending on the athlete's age and where they are in their career. I'm not talking about the rookie who is first year senior elite. I'm not talking about the veteran, although they could fall into this pool. Okay, I'm talking about the average, the middle chunk
Mm-hmm.
of athletes. I think this is a great opportunity to focus on building strength and flexibility and mindfulness, right? So sometimes we try to increase flexibility, but sometimes when we're increasing flexibility, we can become sore, right? Nobody wants to be training sore when they're preparing the routines for a World Cup, Olympic qualification. Same thing for strength, right? So, and power. So I think this is a great opportunity to have a little bump in your strength and power and flexibility during these times. And also, like you said, when you come back, I remember after the 2012 Olympic Games, I took off. I think it was like 7 or 8 weeks, and when I came back, my back was hurting, but my ankles were like killing me, and I have never had any ankle problems in my whole entire life. But during those time, I wasn't running, I wasn't jumping rope, I wasn't doing any plyometrics, I wasn't doing pretty much any exercise. And so these weird, funky things start happening when you come back. So in order to make sure that doesn't happen, right, that we can focus on certain movements. So focusing on the load of the trampoline. So what we can do is we can do some external loading. So that means is um, doing some exercises with a heavy backpack, or if you have a girlfriend or a wife or a husband that's, someone that you're able to hold, even just holding them, sitting on their shoulders, that when you have that external load, your spine starts to compress the same way that it compresses in the bottom of the trampoline. So if you're in order once that happens, once you have that compression, all the muscles around your spine start to work hard to make sure that the spine doesn't get hurt, right? So we can't really find the same loading, but we can do some kind of loading so
Yeah.
that the muscles in the back still are learning to stabilize, right? We can also do some plyometrics for the fast twitch rebounding. So we can do some rebounding box jumps, or even lots of jumping rope. Um, and then, of course, we can also strengthen the shoulders by so many different ways of different pulling movements, handstand holds, and then also strengthening our core to withstand those loads. When I say core, I'm more talking about our abdomen, specifically planks, weighted planks, and stuff like that. So I think there's a lot of things that we can do. And really all we're doing, we're giving a bump in our strength, but we're just minimizing the risk of injury on return. That's really all we can do. So we're not really taking steps forwards, but we're diminishing how many steps we're taking backwards when we come back. So
Totally
I think
agree.
those are some things that I've been doing with my team, and I've been doing as well. And Camila, my wife, and Jeffrey, my brother, have been doing as well. So um, but and then lastly, also mindset. We've been watching videos and going over routines, and well, I haven't really been going over routines, but they've been doing that. My going over routines is more like eating a second piece of cake or something like that. That's my mindfulness. But
So I would like to add on to that, because let me tell you one thing that we're going to do with my athletes here that we haven't started. So this will come out as a surprise to them. We're going to start probably today or tomorrow. They don't know yet. But so one of the coaches in our gym, Claire Johnson, she's actually reading a chapter or half a chapter a day from a trampoline book, right? And we going to send that video to them every day. They have that chapter to read, because I think that's really, really great motivation for them to to understand that concept. Okay, and I'll link the book on the description below, so you guys, if you guys want to read the book, you can read the book. But I think as coaches, that's something that we can do, because if we give them the book, they might not read it. But if we give them someone that is reading the book for them, and they listen and they see that is a coach from your club, or even someone that they idolize, that is totally different the way it gets in the brain. Totally different. So I think that, and especially the mind, I think that's the one that needs to be worked the most, because if you keep your mind sane, your body will believe anything. But if you seriously, watching routines for me was one of the most important things when I was preparing myself for the Olympic Games. And I don't know how to explain this, and this might sound like really, really dumb, but I think the month before the Olympic Games, I dreamed that every night I was doing this perfect routine at the Olympic Games. I dreamt, okay? And in that routine, only this would come to my mind. I'm so good. Should I do a Miller Plus instead of a Miller? And then, and I would do the Miller Plus and out bounce and stop and all that. But like, it was all these things come to my mind. Like the routine was in slow motion, like perfect kickouts, holding in the middle of the trampoline, right? And I think by continue to watching videos and being on the right mindset, these are the things that lead to, you dream trampoline, you leave trampoline, you are trampoline, it's your life.
it's funny, I was doing some cleaning during this quarantine out of my old closet, and I found tons, like a stack probably about this tall, of old DVDs from VHSs that were converted to DVDs of different competitions and videos from inspirational videos by Matt Turgeon and all, from all these different world championships in the 90s and even in the 80s. And, that's what I grew up watching. And one other thing that I don't know if you did, but I used to, in my back of my trampoline journal, or sometimes even at school, I would dream of writing routines, just full front half and half out Trivis Pike, Trivis Rudy out Pike, and I would add up the difficulty and be like, "Whoa, I could do maybe one day a 17 or 18 or 19," and that it was so much fun to dream, and it really kept my morale and motivation up.
So I did that, but when I was younger, like when I was probably like 16 or 17 years old, I was not even on the
Right.
national team, right? I would walk on the street and I would do the skills, and I would build these new routines at school. And oh, that has two more tenths difficulty. Oh, I think I can do that one. Yeah, that was like for several years. It was like that. I think that's how you get good at doing difficulty, because you just instantly you just learn everything without even noticing that you're learning, because your motivation is so high. So that's my life was just like that too. So
That's
should
awesome.
we go to a new segment today that we're trying to introduce, which is the Q&A, and then replying to
Yes.
answers.
All right, our next segment, we're gonna go to some Q&A. You guys can ask us some questions by commenting on YouTube. You can reach us at trampolineinsight@gmail.com. You can reach us on Twitter at trampinsight. You can reach us on Instagram at Trampoline Insight.
We have one question only this week, but we hope next week we can have more. So the first question is from Thomas Hamblin, and he asks, "What is the average retirement age for men and women on trampoline?" What do you think, Steven? We don't have any actual numbers here, but what do you think?
So I think, I could be wrong, but I don't know how many years ago, it's maybe 5 years ago. I think it was all from Sweden that maybe put out some data. So maybe we can reach out to him. But in my opinion, I think for trampoline, it might be a little bit longer than tumbling and double mini. In my opinion,
Hmm.
I think for trampoline, the average age of retirement is probably, my guess, 27, 28. And for women, my guess is probably 24, 25. Although the outliers, I feel like the women last longer than the men last longer. So the oldest or the longest career of a woman is longer than the longest career of most
Of the
men.
men. Hmm.
But if we're talking averages, I think the average male trampolinist stays in the sport longer than the average female trampolinist. So my guess is 27, 28 for the men, 24, 25 for the women for trampoline. What about you?
So I was on 28, 29 for the men, and 27, 28 for the women. But I do agree
Oh
with
wow.
you entirely. I do think that the women individually, the women stay for longer than men, and we have some cases right now that happens, right? I do agree with that. I do agree with that. But I think the best way would be, maybe if Ulf listens to the podcast, to send us his study if he hasn't, or we will try to reach out to him and see if anyone has a study made, and when was that study made. Because I feel like in the last 5 years this has changed significantly, and not just on trampoline, but in all other gymnastics disciplines. So I think rhythmic is a little bit older already, artistic is a little bit older already, and I think we saw a big shift on the last 5 years. So I don't know how up to date that study is, but we would love to see it. And maybe someone would like to do another study, because this is a really, really good question. I appreciate the question, because this makes us think a little bit, makes us see how much our sport developed, and how physically something that people could not tolerate past a certain age, now they can go much older than that. So that's interesting, I think. Much, much interesting.
I agree. Maybe we can have a whole another episode just to based on retirement and reasons for retirement.
We
It's
should.
a big topic. All right, guys. Well, that concludes everything that we have to talk about for today on today's episode on the postponement of the Olympic Games and the World Games. Once again, feel free to reach us at trampolineinsight@gmail.com. Comment on our YouTube videos. Reach us on Twitter at Tramp Insight. We're on Instagram at Trampoline Insight. Be sure to like us and subscribe. It helps a lot. And so that you guys can get alerts when we have a new fun podcast out.
Absolutely. And Steven, how can people reach out to you if they want specifically?
So if they want to reach out to me, you can reach me. Probably the easiest way is on Facebook by my name, Steve Gluckstein. You can also reach me on Instagram at Steve Glucks. And I'm in the process of trying to get my Instagram handle back, which was something went wrong. It was at Steve Glucks. And now I have a second Twitter handle, rather, at S Gluckstein. And how about you, Nuno? If they want to reach you, what's the best way?
So people can definitely reach out to me on Facebook. My name is Nuno Enrique Marino, and you can find Nuno Marino and search, and you'll find me. You can reach out on Twitter, NH Marino. It's my handle at NH Marino. And those are mostly the ones that I use the most. I'm at Instagram, but I only have the club Instagram there, which is at MTGAHSV. I would say if you want to contact me, Facebook or Twitter is probably the best way. But I really would like to thank, just to close, thank everyone that has give us really good feedback on the first episode, people that were like super excited for the second to come out, and let you guys know that we'll have some guests in the program in the future. And I think you will enjoy spending this time with us for sure.
Absolutely. Thanks again, guys. Enjoy the rest of your day or drive or wherever you're listening to this, and we'll catch you again soon.